Hi, this is Pooja with Mom to Mom OB, where real women talk to real doctors about the issues concerning them. Today's video is about the second stage of labor and is part of our childbirth series. So let's talk about the second stage of labor. Now, this is where all the action happens. This is the pushing and the delivery. So this is the part that most people think about when talking about labor and childbirth. So everything else was a prelude to this. This is the action video. So second stage of labor. So we talked about the first stage of labor going from 6 centimeters to 10 centimeters, and it's all about cervical dilation. So in your second stage of labor, you're going from completely dilated to delivery. And so the important things to think about with the second stage of labor are what we call the 3 Ps in obstetrics. And the 3 Ps are the passenger, which is baby, the maternal pelvis, which is the bony structures that outline the space available for childbirth, and the power. And power is the strength of the contractions, the force that propels the baby into the birth canal, as well as the maternal force that you exert when you try to push. So those are our 3 Ps. And typically when an issue occurs, your obstetrician will try to identify which P is at fault. And then depending on whether it's power or passenger or pelvis, they may or may not have interventions that can help with correcting the issue. So let's talk about the passenger a little bit. So when we think about the second stage of labor and we think about the passenger, the first thing we have to understand is the route that the baby takes when traversing the birth canal. And so the route the baby takes are called the cardinal movements of labor. And it's a specific series of movements that start with the baby engaging in the maternal pelvis and then flexing its chin. So you see the baby's chin here, little cabbage patch. It doesn't have much of a chin, but the chin will flex, and then it'll allow the smallest diameter of the head to descend into the maternal pelvis. So after flexion and descent occurs, then the baby will rotate internally so that the back of the head is facing up. And that allows for the next movement, which is extension. And the baby extends, which basically starts looking up. And that movement allows it to come underneath the maternal pubic bone. And that's when the crowning, which you might have heard that term, occurs. So you'll see the head and it'll sort of crown until the baby's whole head comes out from underneath that pubic bone. And then the next movement is restitution or external rotation, where the baby rotates back to the original position it was in when it first engaged into the maternal pelvis. And that's when you'll see an anterior and a posterior shoulder, which is the next part of the baby that delivers. And then finally, the entire baby delivers. So that's the little dance that our baby takes as it travels through the birth canal. Now, you can imagine that not every baby read the book about the dance it was supposed to do. And once in a while, they'll miss a step. And if the baby isn't descending down the birth canal in, a regular fashion with pushing a little bit at a time, it's not expected to happen quickly. On average, it takes an hour or 2 for women to push out a baby. But if it's taking longer than that, as obstetricians, we start thinking about, is it the power? Is it the passenger? Is it the pelvis? And when we think about, the fact that the passenger might be the issue, we think about these cardinal movements and where the baby might be sort of hung up. And there are times where we can help straighten the angle of the head, either manually or with position changes or with forceps to make the movements occur in a way to facilitate the baby's journey through the maternal pelvis and to delivery. So if you are making steady progress in your second stage, you're likely going to be exerting a lot of effort pushing, and pushing can be really hard. So I want to take a little time to talk about effective strategies for pushing and talk a little bit about the physiology so you can understand why you're being coached on so many techniques when you're pushing. So one thing about effective pushing is that you use this to increase your power, right? So when you think about the rhythmic contractions of the uterus, you want to time your pushes so that you're pushing when your uterus is also generating that force. So that way you can sort of add your effort onto the physiology of the power being generated by the contractions. So one thing is timing. So you want your pushes to be at the same time as the contraction. Second thing is to use your body to help generate power to push the baby out. And one way you can do that is actually by using your diaphragm. So your diaphragm is the covering underneath your lungs, between your lungs, your chest cavity, and your abdominal cavity. And so that muscle is what expands when you take a big breath and fill your lungs. Your diaphragm actually pushes down. And so you can imagine that when you do that, you increase the pressure inside your abdomen and surrounding your uterus. So if you take a big breath, fill your lungs, and then push, you're going to be even more effective. When you're pushing, you're not pushing with your legs, because the idea is not to push the legs of the stirrups away from your bed. The idea is to push like you're having a bowel movement to generate force in your abdomen. So you're taking a big breath and then you're contracting your abdominal muscles like a sit-up or a crunch. You don't have to lean all the way forward and put your chin to your knees, but just elevating your shoulders off the bed and putting your chin to your chest the way you would if you were doing a crunch on the floor is going to engage all of those abdominal muscles and create additional intra-abdominal force. So expanding your lungs so that your diaphragm is pushing down, engaging your core abdominal muscles through doing that crunch motion, timing that to coincide with the maximum force of the uterine contraction, and trying to relax your pelvic muscles and your legs the way you would if you were having a bowel movement. That is the sequence of a really effective push. Common mistakes that are made is I talked about pushing with your legs. So you're not trying to push the bed away. The other thing is pushing with your elbows. So pushing the back of your bed away is also not going to generate abdominal force. So arms and legs, not really part of it. You want to be using your core, and you might use your arms to pull on your legs to help engage your core. But the most important things are timing, engaging that core, and taking a big deep breath so that your diaphragm helps you as well. Ways that you can be more effective in your pushing is to have biofeedback. So you might have a coach, a doula, an OBGYN, a nurse coaching you, telling you when you're doing it right and when you're not doing it as effectively. But you can also use a mirror and watch or touch the baby's head yourself and feel how much movement is occurring. And that sort of biofeedback helps you correct, adjust, make changes, sometimes subconsciously in a way that's very effective. So it's something to consider. Other methods of trying to generate the same movements that I talked about is you can try a tug of war with your doula, your partner, or your doctor, where you're sort of pulling on a rope or even on side bars to your bed and using your arms to sort of pull yourself up a little bit to start engaging your core. Because some of us, after being pregnant for 9 months, have lost some of the muscle tone of our core. And so we need a little bit of arm or leg support to get us into that position so that then those muscles can fire and really produce the power that we want. And so finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about pain management again. We talked about it with the first stage of labor, but in the second stage of labor, it becomes just as important or more important because the pain can be really distracting to some women. Other women become sort of in the zone while they're pushing. And some of you may have heard of sort of hypnobirthing, where people practice kind of getting in that mental mindset of being able to push, and they've practiced it, and it comes, and they aren't as distracted by the pain. But if you're someone who thinks that pain would be a deterrent to your ability to effectively push, then again, considering things like epidurals, IV pain medicine is usually not the safest option in the second stage of labor, because we don't want that activity of that narcotic to be on board when the baby is born, because it can cause some respiratory depression. But an epidural can be maintained through the second stage of labor. Warm compresses on the back can feel really good, or ice. If you have the ability to do a heat pack, or if you're in the early part of labor and want to take a hot bath or shower, that can be helpful as well. Typically, pushing in that environment can be a little bit of a challenge for the medical provider to assist you, but some of these are effective pain options. Another thing to consider is a pudendal block, and that blocks the pain, particularly of that head really low in the birth canal. The last thing to talk about is issues that can occur during the second stage of labor. And one issue is that it can just take too long. Some women become really exhausted after 3-4 hours of pushing. And so that's something to be aware of, that the second stage of labor can take a long time, and that you really want to reserve some energy for that part. And then the other issues have to do with the baby. So we talked a little bit before about the fetal heart rate and how in the first stage of labor that can be an issue. Again, the same issues can occur during the second stage, and actually occur at a higher frequency during the second stage of labor. So again, if the baby's experiencing decelerations or slowing of its heart rate that persists, that is happening with every contraction, lasting longer periods of time, and isn't responding to interventions to try to remedy that, those might be reasons where your OBGYN might talk to you about the option for C-section, which is still a possibility in the second stage. And the other thing that's a possibility, if there is a fetal or maternal indication, is an operative delivery. An operative delivery is vacuum or forceps. So that's something that you can talk to your doctor about, the risks and benefits. Obviously a natural childbirth, a spontaneous vaginal delivery where you're just pushing baby out yourself, is going to be the safest option. But when there are issues that occur with either the baby strip or with just exhaustion and not being able to push anymore, some of these other options, are available and something to think about. So the next episode, we're going to talk about complications more in depth. So I look forward to seeing you again. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'll try to get to all of them. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.